Randy, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Is it ready to start?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome everybody to our general plan review session workshop. I'm very glad to have everybody here. We will be doing an overview of what our current general plan is and possibly taking suggestions or ideas for improving it. So at this point, Ms. Ashton, who is going to take over?
I'll take a roll call really quick and then we can just move into the presentation.
There you go. Thank you.
Councilmember Buchanan, absent and excused. Councilmember Rush, absent and excused. Councilmember Buck, absent and excused. Mayor Pro Tem Hill, absent and excused. Mayor Park.
Aye, here.
Chair Evans,
Here.
Vice Chair Strain,
Here.
Commissioner McFadden,
Here.
Commissioner Cohurdy, absent and excused. Commissioner Croker,
Here.
Commissioner Hamel, absent and excused. Commissioner Nunes, absent and excused. Commissioner Combs, absent and excused. Chair Barth, absent and excused. That's it.
I don't believe she's the vice chair.
I'm so sorry.
I'm not trying to title steal. She just doesn't want it.
Just the security. I need security. I think
I did have it ready,
Take it out.
but I was doing this from memory.
She just looked at me going, no.
That's my
No,
apology.
no, no.
We don't meet often enough. I apologize. I forget.
No mistake. I think we're paid for credit. Absolutely.
Most women say anything.
It's, I know. Yeah, we did that. All right, Ben, whenever you're ready, do you want me to go ahead and share the,
Yes, please. If there are public comments.
no public comment? Unless there's public in the audience, I'm sorry. Did anyone want to speak?
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Just a quick introduction from myself. My name is Ben Ritchie. I'm a principal and owner with De Novo Planning Group, and my firm has been retained by the city to prepare a comprehensive update to the city's general plan. So I won't take too much of your time this afternoon. My basic game plan, oh, the clicker's not clicking. Shut off. Sorry, keyboard and mouse. I can use it. Or just wave at you.
There is. I don't know if it'll.
I'll just wave at you. There's not too many.
Okay.
slides, so go ahead.
Yeah,
jump
just
in.
let me know.
So our basic game plan for today is I'd just like to give everybody kind of a quick refresher, General Plan 101, remind you what this document is and why it's important. Talk to you a little bit about the process we go through to complete this update. It's a multi-year process. We'll be working here for approximately 2 years or so to do a comprehensive update. Public outreach and community, hearing the community's voice and community involvement is very important to the council and the planning commission. So I'll just talk to you about our strategy for doing outreach to the community. And then really I'm here to listen. So it's an opportunity for you guys to articulate to me some of the key issues and challenges that you see facing the community. So I can make sure that we address that as part of the general plan update and give you suggestions and tools to make sure that Houston's realizing its own vision for itself. So we'll have a real open-ended opportunity for discussion. So next slide, please. So for those of you who are not working in the planning department on a daily basis and don't have the distinguished joy of dealing with the general plan on a day-to-day basis, just kind of a quick overview refresher of what it is. A lot of times we refer to this as the city's constitution or its blueprint. So it defines a long-term vision for future growth and resource management over an approximately 20-year timeframe. So it's a very forward-looking document, defines land uses, defines city policy across a wide spectrum of topics and issues. While the state of California has adopted general plan guidelines, they require that every city and county in California have an adopted general plan, and they provide a framework for what needs to be addressed and included in that general plan. There's a tremendous amount of leeway in terms of how Houston crafts its general plan to meet its needs. You're not Ceres, you're not Fresno, you're not San Francisco. You have your own set of issues and challenges and priorities. And so our objective here as your consultant is to listen and to make sure we deliver you a general plan that reflects your values and your priorities. This will be very much tailored to meet your needs and your challenges. So as I mentioned, opportunities for public outreach and public participation are really a cornerstone of that effort. So my job, I'm a professional planner. I do general plan updates for cities and counties all over the state. I know enough to know that I don't know enough about Houston yet. So my job is to show up and listen. I'm trying to ask the right questions. I want you to tell me where you would like to go. And then I'm going to use my professional planning toolkit to make suggestions on how I think you might accomplish those objectives that you tell me you want to achieve. And at the end of the day, we're addressing a lot of topics. So we got to strike the right balance. You know, we're going to be looking to spur economic development. We're going to be looking to protect resources, agricultural land, have clean air, clean water, make sure we've got a good diverse array of housing to meet our needs. And sometimes those can be in conflict with each other. So what we're going to do is craft you an internally consistent document that doesn't self-conflict. And you guys as elected officials, appointed officials, are going to provide the high-level guidance on what the key priorities are. And my job along the way is to not only present you with tools that will help get you there, but to make sure you stay within the guardrails of state law. So if there's certain topics we have to address, I'm going to flag those. If we get suggestions that are going to deviate from those guardrails, I might provide some alternative suggestions on how to maybe still accomplish that goal, but stay within the framework of state law. So what I'm not going to ask you to do is become experts in general plan planning law. That's my job. What I'm going to ask you to do is something you already do, is tell me about Houston and tell me about what's important and tell me about how you want to go forward for the next 20 years. And then I'll help craft a plan that gets you there. Next slide, please. So general plans, you've got one now. Your last comprehensive update was in 2005. Your timing really right now is perfect. You're due for an update. Typically, it's recommended every 10 to 15 years. You guys are at 16 years approximately, so the time's right to do a general plan update. And you've had some changes since 2005 that are relevant to this effort. So I know prior to the Great Recession of 2008, you guys had a real housing boom here. You saw a 78% increase in population between 2000 and 2007. And then housing production really dropped off a cliff after the recession of 2008. So you've had one notable project recently that was, I believe it's called Edgewood, 299 single family units. And that was the last significant vacant parcel within the city limits. And so as we're looking forward, you know, your plan was written pre-recession, pre-housing boom, or kind of in the midst of the housing boom, responding to the housing boom, which then obviously shifted dramatically in 2008. So it's time to come back and kind of just reassess where your policies are taking you for the next 20 years. And with that in mind, since 2005, there's been a number of notable changes to state planning law. So there's new topics that aren't addressed in your current plan that you're required to address in this updated law. So we talk about climate change and climate resiliency, and regardless of where you fall on the spectrum of that, you know, we need to have policies in place that protect against increased flooding, increased wildfires, making sure that we're responding and adapting to changing environmental conditions. We're required to now address the topic of environmental justice, making sure that we aren't writing plans that disproportionately affect disadvantaged communities in a negative way, and the state has a definition of what that means. We need to make sure we address complete streets. In simple terms, roadways used to only be designed for the automobile. How do we move as many automobiles down a roadway as possible, as efficiently as possible? And new state guidance says, look, other users use our roadways. So let's plan for bicycles and pedestrians and transit systems and services. And then we have new regulations related to flood and fire protection, emergency evacuation routes, things of that nature. Next slide, please. So why is the general plan important? So first and foremost, it really defines the community's vision and values for itself. So some of those bullet points there, quality of life, small town atmosphere, agricultural traditions, we lifted those right from your existing general plan. I don't want to come in and make any predetermined conclusions about where we're headed, but my gut tells me that those are still going to be key priorities as we move forward over the next 20 years. I think there's going to be more that we layer into that. So as we're talking to you and we're talking to your community, we're trying to flesh out what those top priorities are for Houston. So this is a great opportunity for the council and the planning commission to go out and reconnect with your community, reaffirm those values, add some new values to the list, and make sure we kind of keep our eye on the prize in terms of what direction we're heading in terms of this update. And the general plan is comprehensive in scope. So it really touches most aspects of city governance and decision making. So it obviously relates to land uses, where your commercial, your residential, your industrial, your agricultural lands are located, and how those land uses interact and interface with each other. It relates tremendously to your infrastructure planning. Understanding the growth projections we have for the next 20 years is going to put you in a position to plan for roadways, plan for police and fire protection services, and other community public services like libraries, parks and recreation, things of that nature. So the general plan lays out the trajectory, the policy guidance, and it'll be accompanied by an environmental analysis and EIR that's going to also help you understand the magnitude of growth you might expect over the next 20 years so you can plan your infrastructure and services accordingly. And then, of course, it also touches on the topics of resource conservation. So what are the city's strategies for clean water, adequate water supplies, preserving agricultural lands, enhancing the agricultural economy, groundwater protection, things of that nature. Next slide, please. So some other reasons why the general plan is important, talking about infrastructure, there's going to be a lot of strategic advantages on how you can craft your CIP and make budget decisions in the future. So if you understand some of the needs coming down the pipeline, it can be a tool for staff and for the council and the planning commission to craft your CIP correctly. It serves as a management tool used by staff and decision makers. So it provides continuity in policy direction as councils come and go. There's turnover in the planning commission. This is going to be that stable policy guidance that's going to provide some assurity to the community, the development community, and also staff on how the city stakes out a position on various key policy issues. So it's going to help you with your utilities and master planning efforts. It's also going to help you streamline development that's consistent with your general plan. So without getting too far down the rabbit hole of CEQA in terms like tiering and streamlining, when you have a modern, fresh general plan accompanied by a certified EIR, and then a developer comes through the door with a project that's consistent with your general plan, the bar for his CEQA hurdles are going to be low. And so when he or she comes in with an application, we review it for consistency with the general plan. The environmental analysis is going to make the approval process smoother from the environmental regulatory standpoint. And then, of course, compliance with state law is usually considered a good thing when you're going after various grants, transportation funding. We can grumble about Sacramento, but being in compliance with general plan law is going to open up additional revenue streams and grant sources that the city may wish to pursue for local use. Next slide, please. All right, so what all do we cover? So general plans are broken into elements. Think of them as topical chapters. There are 7 mandated elements required by the state of California. Those include land use, circulation, conservation, open space, safety, noise, and housing. And then the city also has tremendous leeway to address additional topics that are of local concern and importance. So we have 2 optional elements, which will hold the similar or same weight of policy law here within the city once they're adopted in your general plan. And those are economic development and fiscal sustainability. So those would be policies, tools, and strategies to bolster the local economy, provide for good, sound fiscal governance, and those will work in complementary tandem with the rest of the mandatory elements. Next slide, please. And then another key component of your general plan, which resides within the land use element, is your land use map. Most of us are a little bit more familiar with a zoning map. What's the zoning on my property? What's that zone? Don't want a zone change. The land use map is very similar. It's at a slightly higher, rougher grain level of detail. So you may have a low density residential land use designation in the general plan, and then you may have some more fine grained zoning, whether that's an R16 or an R18. I'm not quite sure how you guys break down your zoning map, but zoning provides a little bit more specificity. Your zoning code provides more specific details on things like setbacks and height limits and things like that. But the general plan land use map will assign a land use designation to every single legal parcel within the city limits and within the city's sphere of influence. So the sphere of influence is, of course, the land that's outside your boundaries, adjacent to the city, technically legally a part of the county. However, it's part of the logical anticipated growth boundary of the city in the future. And so basically the land use map determines what can be built and where. As I mentioned, similar to zoning, but a more general level of detail. And as we're doing this update, this is an opportunity to revisit your land use map and do some fine tuning. So if you've got areas within the city limits where you think land uses should change or transition over the next 20 to 30 years, this is an opportunity to make those changes to parcels within the city limits. We also have an opportunity to look a little bit more closely to parcels within your sphere of influence, particularly along the eastern side of the city limits. You've got a big swath designated urban reserve, which is essentially a placeholder saying, we think we'll build out here someday, but we're not quite sure what. And then we've got choices. We can leave that as urban reserve and leave it vaguely undefined for the future, sort of a placeholder for future urban development. Or we can get down to a greater level of detail and start to say, look, we're really going to need some more industrial lands, or we need more commercial services on the outskirts, or we're looking for more housing at various densities. And so at future meetings, I'll be checking back in with the Planning Commission and the City Council to get some additional input on your thoughts on possible changes to the land use map. But I didn't want to go too far down that rabbit hole with today's kickoff meeting. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's a process. As much as I would love to show up, bang this thing out in 3 weeks, hand it to you and say, here, we're done, that doesn't do the process justice. So a couple steps that we're engaged in right now. One is the existing conditions report. I like to say it's very challenging to effectively plan for the future if you don't have a solid understanding of what your starting point is. So we're doing the existing conditions report analysis now. It's going to be a very technical, heavy, lengthy document. It's a little bit of a dry read, but you're going to find a lot of good, useful information in there. We look at everything from your existing housing stock, your demographics, market analysis of housing and commercial property availability. There's going to be a fiscal analysis of city government operations, natural resources, existing community noise levels. We'll talk about existing agricultural resources within our study area. So it's a very diverse, broad set of topics. We don't make policy recommendations in this existing conditions report. It's a technical analysis of our starting point as we're getting going with this general plan update. We'll also, for the wonks on the process, the existing conditions report will form the environmental setting of your environmental impact report. So we'll be writing this with future CEQA analysis in mind. So as soon as that report is done in the next couple of months, we'll make sure staff reviews it carefully, and then copies will be available to everybody, Planning Commission, City Council, and the general public. So there's no action to take on that existing conditions report, but it'll be a great resource. I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to work to identify community priorities and what our outreach efforts are. We'll undergo some land use map refinements, as I just mentioned, and then we'll really get into the thick of it. That'll be drafting the goals, the policies, and the action items that will make up the meat and potatoes of your general plan itself. When that document is ready, we'll present draft copies to the Planning Commission and the City Council. Once we get your thumbs up, I'm not approving it at this point, but a thumbs up that we're getting it correct, we've tackled the big issues, you don't see any big red flags, we'll then send it out for public review. So we'll hold public workshops, we'll have an open house, we'll explain it to the public, we'll get their feedback, we'll answer their questions, and just make sure that the community understands what we've drafted, how it'll be used, and allow them to give us feedback on what we've done. We'll also prepare the environmental impact report, and ultimately we come back for a series of adoption hearings with the Planning Commission and the City Council. And there's opportunities for public participation through each of these stages of the project. All right, so knowing that public participation and community input is very important, I wanted to walk you through kind of the diverse portfolio of approaches we're taking to make sure we hear from your community. First and foremost, I would direct people to the general plan website. We built a dedicated website just for this project. So that's houston.generalplan.org. And that is your one-stop shop for resources. So you'll see me come and go over the months. You'll wonder what the heck's he up to? What's the latest? When's the next meeting? He told me about some report. Is that done yet? Check the website. It's going to grow and grow. We've built the whole thing out, so the framework is there. But as I talk about these various milestone documents or various community meetings and workshops, those all get dropped into the repository of the general plan update website. We have an online survey. It's there, it's live, it's active right now. So we would encourage people to visit the website. You'll see a pop-up box encouraging you to take the survey so you can find the darn thing and not have to search around through a bunch of pages. So yeah, if there's contact information, you can click a button to email the project team. You've got some comments, I missed the meeting, or I was there and man, I forgot to tell you about this one important thing. You can email the project team right through the website and all of that comes to me and we share it with staff immediately. One of the next things we're going to be embarking in next month is 2 community visioning workshops. So I'll give a very similar presentation. It's an opportunity for me to introduce myself and the project and the process to your community at large. We'll go through some various activities where we can kind of flesh out what they're thinking is important without having people have to get up with stage fright and raise their hand and stand on a soapbox and try and take over my meeting or not. So I got a lot of tools and tricks up my sleeve for getting community input with keeping a good manageable meeting. So those meeting dates and the information are on the project website. We've prepared a project newsletter also on the website. And I know staff is working to distribute that through a number of means. So they're working through social media, city's website, good old fashioned, sticking them up in the windows at City Hall. So we're really coordinating with staff to get the word out about these visioning workshops. Those are September 9th and 23rd. You will see me periodically throughout the process as we hit major milestones. So when we're starting to put some policies together and want to make sure we're getting it right and we're on the right path, I'll coordinate with staff and we'll come in for a study session. I'll talk to you about what we've been up to. Here's some questions I have. Here's some additional guidance from you guys that I'll be seeking. And so we'll have opportunities for those study sessions. I mentioned once we start getting some draft product put together and we're ready for some community feedback on that product, we'll hold open houses and workshops to make sure we're providing accessible opportunities for them to comment. We'll be interviewing key stakeholders. So that might be school district, it might be the county, it might be Caltrans, it might be the Ag Commission. You know, we'll be coordinating with various parties and interest groups that have a stake in the general plan beyond just the city government. We'll have additional online surveys in the future. And of course, this will all culminate with a series of public hearings. Next slide, please. All right, so that was pretty much my introductory dog and pony show. So before we get into kind of the teeth and the substance of your guys' feedback and input, I just wanted to make sure you guys have an opportunity to ask me questions about the process, what to expect, is or is not addressed in a general plan. I know I just threw a whole bunch at you there at once, so this is a chance you guys have any questions of me. The floor is yours. I'll be happy to answer them.
Mayor.
Any questions from staff or commissioners?
Been here, done this, I get it.
I haven't been here, but getting it. You made a comment, I may have misunderstood. You earlier talked about presenting a document, you said inconsistent with the general plan. That you spoke.
I will internally consistent.
Oh, okay.
I will make
Okay.
sure that the general plan is internally consistent,
Okay.
so that I don't have policies that say preserve every scrap of open space at all costs, followed by convert open space to industrial land for economic development purposes. That's kind of a grotesque example, but I will make sure that the general plan itself, there's gonna be a lot of priorities. We're gonna talk about, we need more housing, but we're gonna try and keep traffic managed. We're gonna talk about preserving open space, but spurring economic development. And so what I'm gonna do is thread the needle to try and listen to you guys and come up with a plan that provides the right balance for Houston as you move forward. And my job is to deliver a plan that doesn't conflict with itself internally.
I thought I misheard that, but it's checking.
Okay, so we're gonna do an overview today. And then going forward before the workshops, if we come up with any concerns or issues, can we relay them through staff to you?
Absolutely. And my intent today, I'm trying to read the room here. I've got a couple of activities, but I'm thinking our best is just to have you guys talk to me in terms of what's important. So my overarching objective for today's workshop is to listen to you guys about what the pressing issues are in Houston that I need to be aware of so that I can make sure I'm crafting a plan to address. So I'm not planning to go through your existing plan in detail. Today's not an audit review of your current plan. I'm basically here to listen. And so if we could have, it might be 2 slides forward. I might have some older slides. It'll just some very basic questions that kind of get the, and next one. So ignore the posted aspect of this, but I'll just pose this question to get the conversation started. So in terms of assets, thinking, yes.
You had the sphere of influence around, and you had that area where you had open land. That's my vision. I want to keep that.
So green space buffers surrounding the city and sphere.
I don't want a lot of stuff in our community.
I'll say people have told me that as well. You know, as much as we take up the unincorporated ag land, I keep hearing they don't want 500 houses out there chewing up somebody's orchard. And yet I've been on the other side. My grandparents sold their damn orchard and put houses on it. So what do you do?
Well, and that's what I'm here to have you guys tell me. So, you know, we go to some communities in the Central Valley that say, find us more land. We're here for rooftops and we want the development impact fees and bring it on. And then we have other communities that say, let's draw the green space line around the community and let's curb sprawl and let's preserve our agricultural resources and our quality of life. And let's focus new development inward and we'll prioritize infill and strategic spot growth opportunities. So.
Well, to piggyback on that, the most recent housing development that got approved caused a lot of controversy in the city. We kept hearing the term keep Houston small. And that is a very important issue to a lot of people in this community. But on our side of it, we have to look, there's going to be some growth. I think we have to look at it as controlled growth. Not 200, 300, 500 homes going in at one shot. Better use of the land to accommodate residents that are moving in. Houston is a very high value target for people wanting to move here. And that's because of the small town environment, our schooling, our law enforcement protection, our fire protection, all the events that we do. So those are just a couple of things that are really, really important for this town.
Small town atmosphere. And I'd really myself like to see, I know we've tried several years to do something with downtown Houston. I'd really like to see some that bloom.
That's true.
There's so much space there that we could do things with. And it just kind of sits.
A little more commercial.
Got some of the best restaurants around in our town.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people coming to Syrians and Charlotte Waterford. I've already been vaccinated.
But but from the planning commission side, we get a lot of comments about they don't want big box retail.
Right, right.
So
They
you
want
gotta be careful about that.
That small, you know, part of,
Maybe a big grocery
Sherlock.
store, but
you know, like Turlock has that Main Street where they have
Where
a
it's
small town, small shops and stuff like that in there. And that's kind of what I would like to see downtown
Absolutely.
in Houston. We did a Bella, the nut company out here.
oh, yeah.
Yes, where we had for fascia and the signs up there where you walk down the street and they were all hanging like, you know, like that. I'd really like to see that in the town. I think that would really give a little kick in the atmosphere.
Excellent.
And I think this is just personal for me. We have tried for years to make our downtown a business center, agricultural center, and it's never really taken off. There is a possibility of a group restaurant going in. I think that would be a real kick in the pants for the city. We are trying to encourage people going home down Santa Fe to make that left turn into Houston. So I'm of the nature of, instead of looking for ag industry to come into downtown, I think we could be more of a craft restaurant type atmosphere where you have people coming in Friday, Saturday night, sitting outside, enjoying a meal in calm breeze, peaceful environment. I do believe that's the way Carmel did it, and they've been very successful at it. So that's just an idea that if we want to spur people to spend money here, that would be almost a really easy way to do it. We could encourage them that way.
Well, you know, before we had COVID, we had that. We had a few restaurants doing, and that was a great favorite thing for people to do. Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, come down, take the family, find some place to sit outside and eat. And we've got the space on the streets to do that, or on the sidewalks to do that. So,
And we're seeing that in a lot of communities. I know we all saw the pop-up parklets where you slap a 2x4 outdoor dining area on the diagonal parking right out in front of the restaurants. And even if when the COVID restrictions are lifted, I anticipate there's going to be a lot of communities that allow those to stay forward. And you realize that we got by with a little bit less parking and the nightlife, the eyes on the street, the little vibrancy. Hey, maybe we double the seating capacity of a given restaurant by allowing for that outdoor dining. I see a lot of communities that are going to stay flexible and not go back to how we were doing it before because we survived just fine without those extra parking spaces. Very good. Okay, very good. So yeah, thinking more about, kind of your community assets in terms of what's working here. So I heard small town feel, community pride, excellent schools, good public safety. We've got some potential downtown. Are there other assets here that we really want to strengthen and retain as we look forward to the future?
I come from the 911 world, so the SO rocks. The fire department does a great job.
yeah.
One of my other jobs besides 911 was a fire chief, and I've worked with Houston Fire before, and I think we're pretty strong here. So I do like the public safety side. I see AMR staging here a lot, so again, for my 911 brain, I think we're doing good there. Unless you need more units, but I'll take anyone. Yeah, 3 guys on.
Thank you.
Houston is, yeah, Houston is obviously very sports oriented. And I know there's, a few years ago, there was a community outreach program where they were trying to redesign the ballpark at Charles and 7th. Oh, thank you. I want to go here 17 years. I should have streets back. At that corner. And I don't think I ever went anywhere. But there was a huge turnout for that.
Yeah.
Huge.
That's school property, isn't it?
No,
Belongs to the city.
Yeah.
We took it over a year and a half ago.
several years ago. Yeah.
Sometime, Ashton, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we have a loan or a grant or something there, something around the amount of 700,000 at one time? We were talking about wanting to put a pool in there or the part.
I don't think we got that grant.
Yeah,
No, we-
all that work was just for the application.
Okay.
So we didn't get the grant, if I may, but we did essentially have a master plan for that park. So there was a lot of community input, so I have that for you. And we are looking to tier off that in terms of all of our parks, putting them together as a master plan. But she is right, this is a baseball town, but it's also a football town. And community input is expected and it's rich. I mean, you will get a lot of input.
It's a family oriented town.
Mhm.
Absolutely. The kids play sports, the parents come out and support them. It's amazing how you can have 20 kids on a soccer field, playing soccer.
Mhm.
And you got 80 parents out there watching those 20 kids.
Mhm.
And we also have, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
we also have a lot of community support when it comes to activities that we have downtown, like the parades and the festivals and the fairs and the nut fruit things. And yeah, we have a tremendous amount of community support. And I remember the 20th Century Club here in town. And when we have our annual craft fair in November, we bring in 2,000 or 3,000 people from all over. To get that, and that opens up business for the other businesses that are around.
Excellent. I grew up in a very similar community myself, so I can relate. So.
Yeah, there's a Britain Nut Festival in April and Beer Craft thing in November. Seems like there's something going on downtown at least once a month. Close to this.
Ag boosters, dinner auction, the FFA pancake dinner, the 4-H pancake dinner, drive-through barbecue, the drive-through one that the Lions just had, they raised money for the town and the kids.
Arboretum, our Houston Arboretum is having a lot of functions over there now too. Weddings, and they're doing wine tastings and cheese tastings, and so they're having wine and cheese.
Don't forget the fire department. I had to go
Barbecue. Oh, absolutely.
they have tried their darndest not to encumber anybody else in the city. And they try to pay their own way through that chicken barbecue. Unfortunately, it's gonna have to come down to possibly a fire tax increase again. But they haven't had one since like 92. Yeah, we're about 4 steps behind everybody else in the county as far as fire tax. But that's not what we're here to discuss. The whole town comes together as a community. I love the idea of the farmers market. Unfortunately, we had some rough spots in that, but it got a lot of people out, a lot of people seeing people that they haven't seen for a long time.
Think of it as it hit a real hot period, weather-wise.
Yeah.
And then you've got Love Houston. You've got tremendous amount of community support for Love Houston. I mean, and the Thanksgiving dinner, you know, a lot of support to churches get involved with that.
Just to know if you're the case, but Julie also hit on a topic that is still really important to this town, and it's bringing back a pool. We did have a pool that was hand dug by all the farmers here in town back, I want to say at the end of World War II. Unfortunately, over time and wear and tear, it became unmanageable. So they finally had to basically bury it. And we had one of the most successful aquatic programs in the county. The Houston Seagulls, they would on Saturday compete out of that pool. You could not find an open space anywhere on that grass and it wasn't covered by a tent. Great input, great attendance. But that's a big thing for a lot of the people here. They want to bring back the pool and the Seagulls.
I've also heard, particularly in my household, but outside the household as well, desire for a skate park.
Brought that up at the planning commission when we were all able to get
That
together.
was my son.
Yeah, yeah, he did an excellent presentation on that.
I think we covered activities.
Would this be, and forgive my ignorance, would this be the time to talk about the current state of the sewer, the water, our infrastructure?
Well, together, why not?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I was like, is this?
There's an old adage that says the only stupid question is the one that's asked.
This is true. Yeah, but just,
Yep.
you know, talk about the 20-year plan for that and the water, is that?
He said throw it under.
Okay.
Yeah, talk to me.
Well, again, I know we've done some major infrastructure growth particularly in our sewer system. But I understand there's still some major infrastructure work that needs to be done. Particularly on Tully Road, we keep
Right, in my house.
cones because of collapsed lines.
When we were going to the planning commission, when we were looking at this new track over here, we were concerned about the sewage,
The connection.
the connections, if we had enough,
And the services says we did.
we did.
Yeah.
So we have a sewer and a water master plan. We will be looking to update those as they're needed. We have infrastructure in place. We are reviewing it to see, its age and when it will come about as part of our looking at the, CIP, so yes, so I have those two as well, and then we do have capacity for those things. We did have a very large water user at one time that we no longer have, but it's part of an industrial zoned area that they're looking to redevelop and put new users in. So we do have the capacity, but we will share those things with you as well.
Fantastic. And then just so I'm clear too, The general plan work itself won't get into kind of the engineering sizing level of detail. So we'll look at future growth, we'll look at the reported capacity of what your system is, we'll determine if 20 years from now, your current system can accommodate that level of growth. And then what we'll do is we'll recommend actions and policies related to updating those master plans, seeking funding. But I just wanted to make sure, I don't want to say manage expectations, but that this group is not expecting me to come back and say, here's what you need from an engineering standpoint on your infrastructure upgrades. But from a policy discussion in the general plan, we'll absolutely talk about those things.
We want to know where you're gonna put the supermarket in
Yeah.
here.
So, and that's actually a great question. And so that's a great thing to actually talk about. So one of the things, the tools we can do, I think about it through the terms of a land use map. So do we have adequate available sites with the right land use designation? Is it in a location that could be economically favorable to a supermarket developer or builder? So what we do in understanding that one of your priorities is attracting a supermarket, I make no promises or guarantees that we'll deliver one. But what we will do is look at your land use map and your circulation pattern, see if you have appropriate locations for one on your land use map. If not, what changes might we make in order to attempt to attract one? And so what we can do is help set the table and give you various tools to help try to attract one. But obviously we all understand those are private market forces that, but what we can do is make sure the land is available on your map. You still have the logistics of a willing property owner, buyer, seller, all those things. But if we leave here at the end of this general plan update, you don't have any 10-acre sites designated commercial where one could go, we didn't do you justice in terms of trying to secure a location. But, all right, so Commissioner Evans, you kind of transitioned us naturally into my next question with some of the challenges. So I understand infrastructure upgrades, and we pre-planned that. I chatted with him. So,
Back and forth.
we pulled it off about it.
Ben was always involved with all of them.
So, in terms of thinking about some of your challenges, so I'm starting to get a good sense of what's working, what your assets are, what the community values. As you're looking forward over the next 20 years, what are the hurdles? What do you see as some of the challenges that this community is facing? So we heard lack of grocery store, we heard lack of, some certainty on infrastructure capacity and ability to fund and implement the necessary upgrades and improvements. What else is on your mind in terms of what's on the horizon?
Condensed housing, I don't want to see any more of it.
Condensed housing, you said?
Like the new track that we have coming in,
That's medium density.
medium density, I don't care, whatever. I don't want to see that in here. I would rather, I'm sorry, let me put this ladylike. I would rather not see something like this in this lovely community.
So
Isn't it?
larger lot, single family
Yes.
homes is what's desired. And when we start talking about small lot, duplexes, townhomes, apartment buildings, those are less desirable.
Mhm. And do you have anything to do you set up anything about, what's that thing we did when we set up the plan, planning commission for this new track? Traffic.
Oh.
Traffic patterns, do you work with any of that in your general plan?
Yes, and that is one of the questions we'll delve into in more depth when we get going. So one of the things you'll hear from me is some awful set of acronyms, and I'm gonna start using terms like VMT, which is vehicle miles traveled. That is the new wonder metric from the state that's gonna help us with greenhouse gases and trip reduction. We all operate now in the world of LOS, level of service, which is more of an A through F grading system of how much congestion is on your roadways. So for years, when we looked at environmental review of projects, we studied level of service. You bring a new project in, how much traffic does it add? Does that lead to congestion? Do our levels of service go down as a result of the new traffic coming in? State of California no longer lets us ask and answer that question as part of environmental review of projects. We now have to look at it through the lens of vehicle miles traveled. The basics being, if you put infill development at higher density, the individual people who live in those projects are more likely to walk to the grocery store or the restaurant. They have reduced trip lengths and commute times because they're more centrally located and they're living in higher density housing. Therefore, each individual per capita is ostensibly driving less vehicle miles per day or per year. We'll have to analyze that in the EIR, and you have to have policies in your general plan related to vehicle miles traveled, state requirement. You still retain the option of keeping level of service standards here in Houston. So when new development projects come in, you are allowed to say you must study your impacts to roadway congestion and help to offset those. You just need to do that outside of the environmental process. So for the planners, you can't ask that question under CEQA, but it can still be a part of your development review requirements. So as we're crafting the circulation element of your general plan, we'll make sure we're checking the boxes on vehicle miles traveled. And if this community desires to retain level of service standards, which I suspect you might, you will be able to have policies to that effect as well.
Vehicle miles traveled is when they're doing those studies and looking at, I'm gonna say traffic patterns and whatnot, does public safety come into a realm of that?
Yes, it does. And it's the idea that catastrophically congested roadways lead to inaccessibility by law enforcement or emergency medical providers. You know, that is somewhat factored in. There's not as much of a logical jump you would think from lots of congestion equals public safety. They're looking more in terms of their proper ingress, egress to neighborhoods in the event of a flood or a fire. Can you get neighborhoods out? You know, the campfire in Paradise really shifted things in terms of looking at, okay, we had one roadway on and off the mountain and it bottlenecked and we saw what happened. So we look more in traffic public safety in terms of, are we creating land use patterns where there's multiple ways in and out? And are we designing individual sites where there are multiple ways in and out? So yes, it factors in, but it's not as simple as congestion equals public safety hazard.
One of the reasons why I fought for the bridge for that new subdivision, because that would take some of the traffic out instead of running it back through town.
Neighborhoods.
Yeah.
My biggest concern when it comes to traffic patterns, congestion, increased traffic, that's the biggie for me, is the Main Street Whitmore in front of the schools. We have a high school and elementary school. And I do currently see some vehicles, I'll say exceeding speed limit. During certain seasons, there are increased number of trucks. And I'm really concerned that I don't want to see a mom and their children or just a young child get injured trying to get to and from school.
Well, we have that problem also on Tully and Hatch, Tully and Kenworthy. They don't even stop at that stop sign at Tully and Kenworthy. Nope. And lots of times there's young families or kids out there and stop in the middle of the street or stop in the middle of the street or, you know, so.
I'm sorry, Mayor, when you said trucks, you mean semis?
Yes,
Flatbeds.
yes.
Yeah, Whitmore, you're about.
Commercial traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they come
That's
down Tully,
currently legal
they come
out there.
down Tully also.
Semis are not supposed to go.
Not on the phone.
But they do, because I live right there on the corner of Tully.
And I've known several of them have gotten tickets for doing that too, and it's not cheap.
I heard from law enforcement personnel that under a Farm Ag Act, if it has to deal with farming or any sort of mechanism in that realm, they are allowed and they cannot be
Yeah,
ticketed.
you go to cold storage down there.
Mhm. Yeah. So
And
anyways,
Very good. Other challenges you'd like to talk about? Before I forget, I'm going to circle back on multifamily housing because I want to say a couple things going.
I think any development needs to pay for itself, so it needs to pay for its impact to, staffing and in our infrastructure. And we have a small staff and they do amazing work, but they are taxed out as far as what we can handle in terms of development, bringing more stuff in. So really, we would like to see any developers come in that they pay their fair share of development. So the impacts that it causes to our infrastructure and to our staffing.
All right. One of the things I wanted to raise, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of details just yet, but one of the steps we have to do as part of the general plan update is to also complete your housing element. So it's a component of the general plan, but it's a separate animal. It requires state review and approval by HCD, that's Housing, State Department of Housing and Community Development. The general plan you can update more or less whenever you want to. The housing element's on a mandatory 8-year cycle. Used to be you'd kind of get yelled at, or maybe a slap on the wrist, or maybe you wouldn't have access to state transportation funds if you didn't have a certified housing element. But our newest governor, one of his first acts was to come in and start filing lawsuits against cities that didn't have a certified housing element. So it went from you're in non-compliance, here's tickets associated with that, to here's an active lawsuit, and if you don't correct it immediately, the state will come in and take over your zoning and show you how you will do your zoning to accommodate your housing. So in a nutshell, the state of California determines a statewide regional housing needs allocation. And that gets broken into regional bodies, it goes to the COGS, and then it gets divvied up to the counties and the cities. And a city like Houston, you land with a number. I don't know what your number is off the top of my head. So you have a regional housing needs allocation. And it's essentially broken up into income categories: low income, very low, medium, moderate, above moderate. And what you don't have to do is build housing. The city's not the business of building housing, but you have to demonstrate adequate capacity to accommodate your fair share. And because it's low income housing allocations, the state equates that to multifamily housing. The idea being that apartments for rent or small condos for sale are by their nature more affordable than estate residential 1 acre, 3,000 square foot homes. And so as part of our effort, we are also updating your housing element. We will make sure that's done in compliance with the state deadlines. And what we need to do is essentially audit your existing map to figure out where you can accommodate the sites that have been allocated, or the number that's been allocated to you. So the state gives us some very complicated criteria. They have to be larger than 1/2 acre, smaller than 10 acres. We have to look at infrastructure constraints, flood zones. You can't stick them all off in the corner on an undevelopable parcel and say, see, there, we did it. And so our job will be to find these sites. And if we find them, fantastic. We'll describe where they are. We'll show them on the map. We'll write up your housing element. If we look and we don't find enough, we will need to find more. And by that, we usually are dealing with rezones or redesignations. And so after we go through the process of auditing your existing map to show if we can or cannot accommodate your regional housing needs allocation, I may be back before this group saying, here was the shortfall, here's some options and ideas for how and where we may accommodate those. And so we may come back talking to you about identifying an additional set of multifamily housing sites in the city if the need arises based on the housing element criteria.
Thank you. Didn't we have it?
You know, I just told you.
Yes. What?
It's happening.
Yes, yes.
Which one?
Didn't we have Boston Euclid at one time? There's that block that across from Good Samaritan. Wasn't that designated for low-income housing?
It's high density residential. So
And
we,
those are exactly the things we'll be looking at. We'll make a tally of what you have. We'll work closely with staff. There's very specific criteria we have to use per the state guidance to screen. This counts, that doesn't count. And so we'll screen to see what you have now, what you can accommodate for the state's criteria. And if you can accommodate your allocation, fantastic, that part of it's done. If you can't, then we'll come back and talk to you about here's some targeted changes you might consider to be in compliance.
The cost of lumber, the cost of labor, cost of materials and wool. It's impossible to build low income housing unless you got money you can give away. Apartments work great in a lot of areas. We're gonna have hopefully some apartments built with the Second Street. That,
well,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's already being built.
yeah. that's not technically low income housing, but that's the idea. It's going to be a lot cheaper to go in there and rent or buy than it is to go out and buy a house that just was built.
And adequate inventory. We
Adequate.
don't have to build it. We just
Yeah.
have to have adequate inventory.
And I could spend hours shooting the breeze with you about whether Sacramento's got it right, they don't have it right, this regulation's working, that one, unintended consequences. I'm gonna keep all that to myself.
We've often wondered if there are people in Sacramento that are more interested in smoking wacky tobacco than actually paying attention to what the people want.
Well, I can tell you, I work all over. And so some of my clients are very liberal, very wealthy Bay Area communities, and they're just as pissed about the housing laws as folks in the Central Valley. Sometimes it's for different reasons, but a lot of it boils down to these state regs don't understand who we are, what we're doing here, and this is getting shoved down our throats and it's not going to work anyway. I'll table that and I keep my opinions to myself, but I might be showing my hand a little bit here. What I will do is walk you through compliance with state law, and we can chat after meetings whether the state law is correct or not, but I'll help you navigate through it because it is what it is right now, and we'll find a path that's going to work for Houston, or at least does the least harm. All right, very good. Well, we've gone through assets, we've gone through challenges. In terms of kind of getting my initial pulse on the community, this is exactly the conversation I was hoping to have. So if there's anything else you guys would like to tell me, if there's any questions I didn't ask that I should have, let me know. If you got any other thoughts you want to bring up and discuss, now's a fantastic time. And floor is yours.
I would love to see somebody who's got some money that wants to invest in office buildings in this town. That's one of the things we've had the biggest shortfall. People come out here looking, they want to locate their office in Houston, but they've got no place to put it. We started, 7, 8 years ago with our little micro leasing program out here in the offices. And one of them moved out of there and they went over to the old CVS to get into bigger property. Then they had to move out of there up on Houston Avenue to get even a bigger property. And that's what I call a success story. If you got an office that's working and generating its own business, that's what we need. Is the opportunity to get more business to come into this town, who will generate more income for the town itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I know at one time we talked about putting offices in one of the existing buildings that we have, restaurants and stuff like that here in town. Talked about doing that.
But, and some of the buildings that are available right now are extremely expensive to even think about doing something with. Real estate as a whole has just gone bananas in the last 2 years.
That's a good point. 2 years back, we had to amend the city plan to allow for like in-law quarters. Is,
Accessory dwelling unit.
yeah, is that going to be something else that we would or could research with the this redevelopment plan as to more defining what that would be? And there's still a lot of questions like, what is that? Like, can I go inside my shed and put somebody in there? Or anyway, what does that mean?
So the accessory dwelling, the ADU ordinance that you have in place now, we're not planning to revisit that or amend that. So you guys are in compliance with state law.
Or it has
Yeah.
state law, so it is defined what they can do and what's, I'm just curious, can we count that as our numbers for,
For
okay, that works.
It used to be, yeah, in the world of housing elements, people used to come in and say, well, we've got 4,000 single family homes and they can all build an ADU, therefore there's 4,000, we're good. And that used to fly, and that does not fly anymore. The state has ratcheted down tremendously. They go in cycles on these housing elements, and we're now in the 6th cycle. And the bar has been raised significantly higher on the burden of demonstrating where your sites go. But what we do have is a lot of flexibility and options in talking about our land use designations and what's allowed. So some of the tools I might come back with and the ideas we may discuss further is you know, if we've got a commercial designation now, what does your zoning say about height limitations? And if we're trying to provide an influx of office development without spreading outward and gobbling up raw agricultural land, let's revisit the standards in our commercial districts. Are there height restrictions that would get in the way of somebody building an office? What do we say about vertical mixed use in your downtown? You know, do we want to allow for housing in the downtown area with, you know, live work units or flexible office space? So, you know, hearing the types of priorities and challenges that you articulated gets my planning brain going in terms of, okay, what are the tools available? So we don't want to grow out, we might want to grow up. We got to keep it small town. What do your regs say now? So this is the type of stuff we'll come back with in terms of ideas, where you tell me where you want to go and I'll come back with some thoughts and tools that might get you there, and we can talk about what the implications are and if they feel right.
There's several empty properties downtown, you know, so there, empty lots, that could facilitate that perfectly.
And so that's exactly the kind of stuff we'll look at. So, you know, do you guys have a mixed use designation now?
No, I don't believe that we have one.
So
Discussed it.
I've been a big fan of mixed use recently. So I came out of planning graduate school. I used to joke they beat us with the smart growth sticks. Everything needs to be smart growth. I don't even know what that means as opposed to dumb growth. And so then you see mixed use. It's real popular in a lot of Bay Area communities, and kind of the traditional planning notion of mixed use is this Santana Row downtown utopia with walkable storefronts and everybody lives above it. You know, in San Jose, San Francisco, that works. You got population densities and that works. If we proposed that in Houston and said it's what I call a restrictive mixed use, we must build retail downstairs and residential upstairs, nobody's going to build it. It's not going to happen. I've even seen fringe Bay Area communities in like Contra Costa County that mandated it. Housing demand was so high, they built the multi-story apartments with the storefront retail below. They didn't know what they were doing on the storefront retail. It sits vacant, the floor plates are all wrong, and there's no tenants there. But there's a bunch of people living on top. So it fell short.
When you mentioned Bay Area, I'm South Bay, I'm Sounds like Campbell boy.
I'm doing Campbell's right now. So
And
That's smart, didn't you?
got smart food down here. But to your point, I could see Pizza Factory having 4 apartments above,
Yes.
you know, and that's what you're talking about in that.
So what I would venture is to say, like for your downtown, maybe we come in and I'm spitballing, don't hold me to all this, but we come in and we throw in some mixed use downtown, but it's what I call permissive mixed use. If you want to build multifamily, that's fine. You want to build commercial, that's okay. You want to do a combination of both, you're allowed to, but you're not required to. And so providing that flexibility to allow the market to respond, allow your downtown merchants to expand or provide housing above existing establishments, how can we be permissive to get the desired result? And we'll try and look for double benefits. So if we're lacking some sites for affordable housing, the downtown might be a good location. It doesn't mean we're saying this is a market restricted affordable housing project site. It says we've designated this mixed use, which allows for multifamily housing. And it may end up as office buildings, it may end up as a combination of both, but we'll look for tools that try and give us the best of both worlds.
I know what you're talking about, that Santana Milpas. I worked in San Jose for 30 years and part of the construction company that built those there.
You're smart city, you came out here.
The only thing with the high building with the fire.
You know, if you've ever been to New York, that is the strangest place in the world as far as I'm concerned. But you walk down just about any street in Manhattan, with the exception of across from Park Avenue or places like that, everything in the bottom is a business of some sort. It's either an insurance or a bodega or a pizza place, what have you. And then there's 3, maybe 4 stories above. They're all what they call cold floor walk-ups. They're always rented because rent is so expensive in New York. They rent just a broom closet and make money on it. Talking about the secondary family housing, first thing I thought of was I got a tough shed in my backyard.
Can my kids stay there?
No, my wife's got it full of junk. But anyways, secondary housing like that is a nice idea. But you better be having something like a half acre or 3/4 of an acre to build a secondary facility on it. Because everything else would look like junk.
Yep, and with your ADU ordinance now, so you've got those provisions in place that allow folks to do it in compliance with state law that want to, but it never mandates that somebody has to build a second unit on their property.
It's an option.
Yeah, it provides that option, and some are gonna choose to exercise it, whether they wanna move grandma in, or they want some supplemental income, and they think it's gonna pencil over 10 years, or they just need a she shed in the backyard and not have plumbing.
She said, that's a he said.
All right, very good. Well, I could sit here all day and I don't want to keep you longer than we need to. So I've heard a good chunk of information and I'm happy. And if you've got more to tell me, I'm listening. And if we're good, I'm good.
I think at this point, I'm okay with you taking everything we said and shuffling the deck and then letting us know.
Fantastic. There will be,
Any other questions or issues? Do we have any comments from the audience? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much. It was a great presentation, a lot of information. I hope you didn't feel bombarded by all our comments.
no, you guys played ball. This is what I was here to do.
I know we made bridge go cross-eyed, but that's okay. Big bridge go cross-eyed.
No, as an outsider, because I'm not from here, it's a lovely community that's very invested and very opinionated, and but bottom line, they care though. They're gonna come together, you're gonna hear all about it, but the bottom line is they're protecting their community. So it's a cool place. I like it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I need this.
She said they were opinionated. That's what's nice is when you talk to somebody at your church or wherever, and they said, well, where do you live? I said, I live in Houston. Oh, man, I love going outside.
Mhm.
That's the type of attitude I want to see. Other people looking at us and being envious.
Good. Well, we'll do our best not to mess that up.
Safest city in the county, chief.
That's
right.
That's it.
So, Dan, I think that this, can actually cover 3.1, our discussion, or do we need to do that?
You were basically there already.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's gonna be it, but
Okay, if we have no other concerns or,
Are we gonna have another meeting on September 9th?
That is a community visioning workshop. So you are welcome to attend. It will not be a public hearing. It's a community workshop. So if you're there to listen, fantastic. You don't need to be, but it's going to be me doing similar, more structured activities with the public at large.
And where would that be? Here?
That's at the senior center.
Senior center. Okay. All right. If there are no other comments, I will accept a motion for adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn this wonderful meeting.
A second.
Chair Evans,
Aye.
Vice Chair McFadden, Councilmember Hill,
I.
Commissioner Strain,
Aye.
Mayor Park.
All right. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you very